Hey, how's it going, everybody? Charlie Wilson here, aka Sinister Charlie. Welcome back. We've got some more Fat Electrician to get to. This was suggested in the comments, specifically. Yeah, let's get into it. The last war chief, Joe Medicine Crow. I'm pretty sure I've heard this story before. I'm not exactly sure what the details are, but. And we hit 4K, so thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Didn't think I'd get to 4K in less than a year. I think around this time last year, I was sitting at around 1,500 subs, so it's like awesome, dude. I don't know what to say, so thank you. And yeah, let's get into this story. And if you got any suggestions for any other videos, I usually say this at the end of the video, but I'm all over the place. But leave it in the comments, and we'll get to it. Like
and
this
I
one.
quote, "With the incense of burning cedar and the singing of sacred songs, I came into the world. I was singing too, although they probably thought I was wailing." Today we're talking about Dr. Joe Medicine Crow, the last man to perform all 4 tasks to earn himself the title of War Chief, and he managed to do it all.
Oh yeah,
World War
this
II.
I have
But
heard
first, a word
this.
from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Ground News. Hold on.
Bing.
In all caps and in red. Avoid using phrases like quote. But first, a word from today's sponsor. Try to incorporate a natural segue into the ad. All right, you want a segue? I'll give you a segue.
I could probably do a good one.
Ground News isn't a news source, but the world's first news comparison platform. They collect news from over 50,000 sources, sticking it into one convenient app, allowing you to compare all the news coverage in one convenient location, allowing you to simply swipe over to read different headlines for the same exact story, being able to tell which outlet is biased and which isn't, and how factual their articles actually are. And if that wasn't enough, they also have cool features allowing
that's
you
a
to
good
search for
idea.
news on an actual
But,
map by geographical location.
I don't know who does the collating, or I don't know how it works. I don't know. I'm an idiot.
And they have blind spot coverage showing you articles that are receiving little to no coverage in the mainstream media. So for example, just to show you how this works, I have personally been following
I don't know why I
a story
paused it
coming
during
out of
an ad.
California where an angry otter keeps kicking surfers off of their surfboards. For days, she's been evading arrest from authorities after committing what they're calling longboard larceny. And utilizing Ground News, I can see that today alone, there's been over 49 news outlets all reporting on it, and it allows me to quickly swipe through the most popular headlines, seeing that they're all virtually identical and highly factual, which allows me as a news consumer to conclude that everybody on the political spectrum, both left, right, and center, all thoroughly enjoy the world's cutest carnivorous mammal messing.
It's a good
with
ad
babies.
read.
Born on October 27, 1913, Joe was raised on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana under the watchful eye of his grandfather, the original Chief Medicine Crow.
My grandfather on my father's side was Sioux Indian. I don't know a whole lot about him. I've seen pictures, but yeah.
Who was considered to be one of the greatest Crow war chiefs of all time, and he would raise Joe to follow in his footsteps. As a child, he was taught how to hunt, fish, track, ride a horse with no saddle, and to make him tough, his grandfather would make him run outside in the snow barefoot and bathe in frozen rivers. All of which were skills and traits that Joe would need to even stand a chance at becoming a war chief like his father and his grandfather. You see, to become a Crow war chief, you had to complete 4 tasks. You had to lead a successful war party where neither you or any of the men you were leading got hurt. You had to disarm an enemy in combat. You had to steal an enemy's horse, and finally you had to perform a counting coup. Most people describe a counting coup as touching the enemy without actually having to kill them. I don't know if that's the PG-rated version or if they're just underselling it, because it's way more badass than that. One of the ways that you can do this is to run up and touch the enemy with your hands, your bow, or your coup stick and escape unharmed. And this is seen as an extreme act of bravery because rather than shooting at the enemy from far away with a bow or a gun, it takes a real badass to roll up on somebody that wants to kill you, get within arm's reach and go boop, and then get away completely unharmed. Like you're just letting the enemy know, by the way, you're completely outclassed and you should probably reconsider what you're about to do next. The other way you can perform a counting coup is to force the enemy to surrender without actually having to kill them. It's the equivalent of making your enemy say uncle or
The first one's kind of more badass.
tapping them out. And here's the kicker with the whole thing. This criteria was deemed incredibly hard to achieve back in the day when it was invented hundreds of years ago. And it was only accounting for Native American tribes going up against other Native American tribes, or like dudes with muskets. It definitely was not criteria that was created with the foresight to account for the battlefield changing to incorporate machine guns and tanks,
horses,
let alone the
dog.
fact that horses aren't even
There
the
you
main
go.
mode of transportation at this point in time. It's going to be hard enough to find a horse on the battlefield, let alone strategically transfer it to an alternate location. But
Word.
that's what Joe Medicine Crow has to do if he wants to become a war chief. But again, all that's just assuming that there is a war for Joe to even fight in, because it's only 1929, he just graduated 8th grade, and he's about to go off to college to achieve his associate's degree, which he does. And then he goes on
word
to
up.
achieve his bachelor's degree. And
Word
then
up.
he goes on to become the first Crow Native American from his tribe to achieve a master's degree. He then begins working on his doctorate degree, but that gets stopped in its tracks because 1941, Pearl Harbor happens, America enters World War II, and life in America, as everybody knows it, gets flipped upside down.
Noses
In the
issue.
days immediately following Pearl Harbor, hundreds of thousands of Americans would volunteer to join the U.S. military. But Joe Medicine Crow was not one of them, because at the time he was 28 years old, and in 1941, at 28 on the dot, you were deemed too old to serve in the U.S. military.
Yeah,
So
I think today it's the cutoff is 35, if I'm not mistaken. If you get a waiver, you can be older. We had a guy in our boot camp division in Great Lakes who was 38, I think, when he joined, but he had to get a waiver to be able to join. So it's not impossible if you're older and you want to still join the military. I don't know why you would at your age, to be fair. Maybe you got family you can't need to support or something. I don't know.
unable to
I'm
fight and
just
unable to finish his
spitballing.
doctorate, he would take a job as a teacher in a Native American boarding school in Salem, Oregon for a short period of time. He would pretty much immediately quit that job and go to work in the shipyards in Washington to at least help the war effort in any way that he could. And he worked his ass off in that shipping yard for a year until November of 1942, when the United States government would strike down the age restriction on joining the military, and Joe was officially able to join if he wanted to. Which is exactly what he does, because he's got to go over there and end this shit so he can go back to school and earn his doctorate degree.
Be a doctor.
So fast forward March 1943, Joe's been through training and he is now all the way over in France on the Siegfried Line. If you don't know, the Siegfried Line was Germany's last line of defense before being able to actually enter Germany. It was essentially their entire western border that had been fortified to resist invasion. The entire thing was covered with giant concrete spikes known as dragon teeth that made it impossible for tanks or any other type of vehicle to get
That's
past
pretty
them.
cool.
And then in front of those spikes were mines, and in front of that was barbed wire. And on the other side was German machine gun nests, mortars, and artillery ready to slaughter any foot soldier that tried to make it through. And Allied forces have been halted here in their tracks since August of 1942, but then in March of 1943, this new guy shows up. He's
Who
already
dat?
got a reputation for being a badass. He's rocking Native American war paint underneath his fatigues, and he's got a yellow painted eagle feather underneath his helmet for protection. Surely this man is the main character. We're gonna see what he can do. So Joe's commanding officer pulls him aside and says, hey, look, if anybody can pull this off, it's going to be you. But I need you to take a small group of guys and a bunch of explosives, make your way through the Siegfried Line, find a German machine gun nest, and completely demolish it. That way we can get some construction guys in there. They can take out the barbed wire and the mines and the dragon's teeth without getting shot at the entire
Throw
time.
some CBs
and we
at
can
it.
start funneling forces in and finally break through this line. So on March 15th, 1943, Joe Medicine Crow would lead 7 other men through the barbed wire, through the mines, through the dragon's teeth, all while being fired at by German machine gun fire and mortars exploding all around him, and they would make their way to the machine gun nests and begin blowing up as many of them as they could. Because of this, Allied forces are finally able to break through the Siegfried Line. Joe Medicine Crow is believed to be the first American to set foot into Nazi Germany, and all of the men that
Really?
he led into this raid were completely unharmed, meaning that Joe Medicine Crow had just successfully led his first war party, and that he had completed the first task in his journey to becoming the last war chief.
I'm probably gonna guess there's gonna be a lot of drinking on this guy's part. And by the way, I have those same genes. I have those same native genes. It's probably why I don't drink anymore.
Fast forward a couple months, Joe's entire unit's clearing out a small German town, and they're in the middle of a huge firefight. So Joe decides he's going to cut down an alley so that he can go and get around to flank the enemy. As he's running down the alley, he gets far enough down that he thinks he should be able to turn in and get to where he can find a good position to launch an attack. And that's when he turns into this narrow gate into somebody's backyard, and right as he turns into the gate, he collides helmet to helmet with a German soldier. It is now just Joe, this German soldier, and the firefight in the background. So Joe leaps forward, grabs the German's gun, throws it to the ground, raises his gun at the German, ready to fire. The German's standing there completely helpless. And for some reason, Joe's not quite sure why, he decides that he's going to throw his gun on the ground too. And they're going to, and I quote, tear into one another. So they start having a good old-fashioned fist fight, and this German ends up getting the better of Joe. He ends up wrestling him to the ground and getting on top of him and hitting him. And finally, Joe would manage to roll him over, get on top, hit him a couple times in return, and then he would begin strangling him. This guy's entire head is turning different shades of red and purple and blue as Joe is quite literally strangling the life out of him. And in one last fit of desperation, he manages to buck Joe off just enough to be able to gasp out, "Mama, Mama." And for some reason, Joe said that this opened his ears and he decided to let the man go. So Joe hops up, grabs his rifle, and carries on to go fight the enemy like he had originally intended to. And at this point, he didn't even realize that he had just completed 2 more tasks to become a war chief. He had disarmed his enemy, and he had committed a counting coup by forcing his enemy to admit defeat without killing him.
That was pretty cool.
Which means the only thing Joe has left to do to become a war chief is to find a horse and then steal it. I mean, strategically transfer that piece of equipment to an alternate location. I know what you're thinking. Good luck. You're not going to find a horse in the middle of World War II. This is the era of cars and tanks and machine guns. But honestly,
it's still the German countryside, right? Most of it. So yeah, you can find a horse.
You'd be wrong, because the German military in World War II actually used horses a lot. So much so that the German military was actually blown away that when America showed up, they didn't have horses at all. They exclusively had motorized vehicles. And this was actually an early indicator to high up Nazi leadership that they were about to get their schnitzel kicked in. Because this highlighted the enormous gap in logistical power between Germany and America. America was creating enough motorized vehicles and refining enough oil, and then had the power to ship it all the way across the planet to provide for their entire military, and Germany couldn't pull that off inside of Germany, let alone across the world. Sorry, we're getting sidetracked. Moral of the story, there's horses, Joe has to find one, and he has to steal it. So
I would assume that's because the United States already has the geographical problem that they've solved, like for an entire country to be able to ship things across it. I don't know, maybe. I don't know.
He can earn the title of war chief. So fast forward a couple months, Joe gets sent out on a mission, being a scout, to scout ahead for his entire unit. So while he's out there by himself, he's looking through his binoculars, and holy shit, it's a German SS officer on horseback.
Yeah.
So Joe, using what his grandfather taught him when he was a child, tracks and stalks this guy for miles and miles, and he ends up leading him all the way back to this farmhouse up on a little hill, and there's an entire SS platoon in there, 30, 40 guys, and there's 50 horses in the corral outside. So Joe makes his way back to his unit, grabs his commanding officer, is like, "Hey, I found an entire SS platoon, let's go get them." So they move out an entire company at dusk, and they surround this farmhouse, and they're gonna wait there overnight with the house completely surrounded, and they are gonna attack at dawn, first thing in the morning. Fast forward, it's an hour before dawn. The Americans have the farmhouse completely surrounded with their guns pointed in at the ready. The Germans have been inside the house all night, pre-gaming for the dirt nap they're about to take. And Joe decides to go over to his commanding officer and is like, "Hey,
I'm gonna steal that horse.
We're here to take out the Nazis. The horses aren't Nazis, the horses are horses." At which point the commanding officer is like, of course. So he gives Joe permission to go out and try to steal these horses 5 minutes before they launch their attack. It's now dusk, minutes before the sun's about to poke up over the horizon, and Joe sets off by himself with nothing but a Colt 1911 pistol and a rope. He sneaks all the way up to the farmhouse. He sneaks past the guy that's supposed to be on lookout, makes his way over to the corral, opens the gate, makes his way into the barn, opens the barn doors up, gets inside, opens up all the doors on all the stalls for the horses, makes sure not a single horse is tied down, and he finds what he describes to be the most beautiful horse he's ever seen, as he ties a double half-hitch Indian-style bridle, and he hops on that horse bareback. Now, Now, he only needs to steal 1 horse, but he's going to steal all 50. Why? Because it's more XP. So Joe hops up on the horse and starts a stampede with the other 49 horses out of the barn, into the corral, out of the corral, and into the field. The Germans, hearing the commotion, run out with their weapons drawn and begin firing at Joe. The Americans start returning fire with their machine guns and their mortars, and it is now just Joe riding through this open field, bareback on a horse, surrounded by 49 other horses. He's just part of the stampede. He starts singing a traditional Crow war song. As
I was wondering what that was.
Machine gun fires and mortars going off in the background behind him as the sun finally peaks up over the horizon and covers the field in front of him with rays of light. He has now just completed the 4th and final task to become the last war chief 50 times over in a matter of minutes. And now that we've finally gotten to the point in the story where I've told you how he performed the 4 tasks, can we finally take a moment to appreciate how utterly ridiculous these 4 tasks are? I mean, sure.
Maybe back in the day it would have been harder. I don't know.
The first one, lead a war party successfully. That sounds like something you should be able to do as a war chief. However, the other 3 are just straight dunking on the enemy. Like, the amount of disrespect in those 3 tasks is palpable. I mean, let's recap. If you want to be a war chief, you got to roll up on the enemy, touch them with your coup stick.
Boop. There you go.
Then after you do that, you got to grab his weapon, throw it over there. And then you steal his horse and bounce. I mean, strategically transfer his horse to your stable. If that's not straight gangster shit, I don't know what is. And if you don't believe me, let's just hear what Joe Medicine Crow himself had to say about this.
Don't you hate it when you have to sneeze, but then you can't? This is a Daniel Tosh joke, but you know when that happens, that means an angel faked an orgasm. All right.
I'm a famous horse thief.
Like it or not, that man was a straight grunt and a badass one at that. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked again. So, Joe and his unit ended up getting diverted over to Poland because war in the European theaters finally starting to come to a close. And as a final act of bravery, him and his commanding officer would end up driving a jeep through the front gate of a concentration camp, leading all of their men in to free everyone there. Shortly after that, Germany surrenders. Joe ends up returning to the United States. He's given a Bronze Star for being the first man to penetrate through the Siegfried line.
You know, that's pretty good. I for a grunt, getting a Bronze Star is pretty awesome, you know. So no, it's no Navy Cross or Medal of Honor, but or Silver Star even.
Line, as well as the French Chevalier, which if you don't know is where you're knighted by France. So yeah, Joe is now officially Sir War Chief Joseph Medicine Crow. He then separates from the military,
France,
returns home to the reservation of Montana, where he goes before his council of elders that includes his grandfather, the original War Chief Medicine Crow, tells him everything that happened while he was away, and they officially award him the title of War Chief. From there, he's unable to go back to school to finish his doctorate degree because he is given the position of official tribe historian by the Crow people. However, he would receive an honorary doctorate degree in 1999 for his work in anthropology, officially making him Dr. Sir War Chief Joseph Medicine Crow.
Dr. War Chief, I presume.
Okay? He would then go on to live happily ever after before passing away April 3rd, 2016 at the age of 102, taking with him the title of the last war chief. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. Why has he got to be the last war chief? What if another young man manages to pull off all 4 feats? Well, it's probably not going to happen, at least not anytime soon, because it's proving to be increasingly harder to A, commit a counting coup in the age of machine guns.
Well, also you'd have to find somebody from that tribe who would want to go off to war and, you know, do all that. Like, the numbers are already pretty low, I'm sure.
And B, find a horse on a modern battlefield. You see, one other man came extremely close to achieving the title of war chief, and it was actually Joe Medicine Crow's nephew, Carson Walks Over Ice. In an attempt to follow in his uncle...
That is pretty sick. That's a sick-ass Indian name, dude. Walks Over Ice. That's pretty cool. See? Because of the ice.
Footsteps, he became a Green Beret during Vietnam, where he committed a counting coup, disarmed an enemy, and led a successful war party. He then proceeded to carry with him on every mission a rope, just in case he could find a horse. but he never did. But then one day, while patrolling the Ho Chi Minh Trail, he could hear rustling in the jungle off to the side. Something was breaking branches, and as he went in to investigate, it was a VC guiding 2 elephants that were tied together, using them as pack animals to carry guns and explosives. He dispatched the enemy combatant and stole both of the elephants. Upon
That
returning home
counts.
and
Come
confessing
on.
his war deeds to the Council of Elders, they would inform him that he would not be granted the title of war chief because, as it turns out, elephants aren't horses. So in
Come on.
conclusion, the world is going to continue to have knights and sirs and ma'ams and lords and ladies and doctors and college graduates and anthropologists and grunts and brave warriors, but the world very well may never have another war chief ever again. But when we did, his name was Joseph Medicine Crow, the last war chief.
Word up.
Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is like, comment, subscribe. Go check out the
I did that.
fatelectrician.com. Quack bang out.
Bing, bang, boom, and a do, and look at you go, and you're a war chief now. Hey, you're a war chief. Get your game on. Oops, I didn't want to do that. That was a fun one. I like that. Yeah, I heard about that whole like the war chief thing and how to become a war chief. I just didn't know the story, so I'm very sore today. I'm very tired. I'm trying to lay around, trying to get my bacchiotomy straight. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe down below. If you got any suggestions, put them in the comments. This was a suggestion in the comments. Could be you. It could be you, seen by a couple hundred people. It could be your comment. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Bye.